The mining ship New Hope drifted through the asteroid field like a metal whale hunting for scraps. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the scanner displays show nothing but rock and ice for the third day running. 50 years had passed since the aliens kicked humanity out of their home systems, and Jake still remembered his grandfather's stories about Earth's blue skies and green forests. The crew worked in shifts breaking apart asteroids and sorting through the debris for anything valuable. Most days they found iron and silicon and other basic materials that kept human settlements alive on the outer rim worlds. Today felt different, though, because Dr. Lisa Carter had been acting strange since breakfast. Lisa ran the science section and usually kept to herself in the lab analyzing samples. She was smart enough to spot valuable minerals from across the ship and had saved them from going broke more times than Jake could count. When she called him down to the lab that afternoon, her hands were shaking. The lab smelled like ozone and hot metal from all the analysis equipment running at once. Lisa stood next to a table covered with small, dark fragments that looked like broken glass mixed with metal threads. She picked up one piece with a pair of tweezers and held it under the bright light. These came from asteroid designation K4H47, she said, and her voice sounded excited and scared at the same time. The mineral composition is impossible according to everything we know about space rocks. More than that, though, these fragments are giving off energy readings that should not exist. Jake looked at the fragments more closely and noticed they seemed to pulse with a faint blue light that appeared and disappeared so quickly he almost missed it. He had seen plenty of strange rocks in his 15 years of mining, but nothing that glowed on its own without any power source. Lisa activated her handheld scanner and ran it over the fragments. The device made beeping sounds that got faster and higher pitched as it got closer to the pieces. She showed Jake the readout and pointed to numbers that meant nothing to him but clearly excited her. The energy signature matches human neural patterns, she said. That should be impossible because humans never had technology like this, and we certainly never left anything in the Kepler 442 system. These fragments are definitely artificial, but they are also definitely human. In origin somehow. Across the galaxy, in a different ship, Commander Rick Davis was having his own strange day aboard the agricultural vessel Harvest Moon. Rick managed food production for 3 human settlements and spent most of his time dealing with crop rotations and nutrient supplements. The work was boring but necessary because humans had to grow their own food in the frontier systems. The communication array started picking up unusual signals during the night shift. The messages came in short bursts using old military encryption, codes that Rick recognized from his service days before the exile. Someone was trying very hard to make sure only humans could understand these transmissions. Rick spent hours decrypting the first message and found it contained coordinates for a location deep in uncharted space along with a single word that made his blood run cold. The word was awakening, and it came with instructions to gather any human ships that could make the journey to the coordinates. Similar messages reached other human vessels scattered across dozens of star systems, mining ships and colony transports, and even a few old military vessels that had survived the Exodus all received the same mysterious transmission. The coordinates pointed to a region called the Veil Nebula, where no human ship had ever traveled. Back on the New Hope, engineer Amy Johnson was helping Lisa analyze more fragments when something went wrong with the containment field. Amy reached out to adjust the controls, and her bare hand brushed against one of the glowing pieces. The moment her skin made contact with the fragment, Amy felt electricity shoot through her entire body. Her vision went white and then filled with images that could not possibly be real. She saw vast cities floating in space with architecture that was clearly human, but more advanced than anything that existed today. The visions showed her massive ships that could cross between star systems in minutes instead of months. She saw humans working with technologies that seemed to bend space and time itself. Most disturbing of all, she saw warnings about something coming from outside normal space that wanted to devour everything in its path. Amy collapsed to the floor, shaking, and Lisa ran to help her, while Jake called for the medical team. When Amy finally stopped convulsing, she looked up at them with eyes that seemed different somehow, like she was seeing things that were not there. "I remember," she whispered, and her voice sounded strange and distant. "We were so much more than this once, and we gave it all up to save everyone. The things in those visions are coming back, and we are the only ones who can stop them. But first we have to remember who we really are." Jake helped Amy to the medical bay, while Lisa continued studying the fragments with new urgency. Reports started coming in from other human ships about similar artifacts being found in asteroid fields across multiple star systems. The fragments all had the same impossible energy signatures and the same ability to trigger visions in humans. Who touched them? As word spread through the human settlements, people began talking about the coordinate transmissions and the strange artifacts. Some called it a trap set by the aliens who had exiled them, but others remembered old stories about humanity's forgotten past and wondered if something important was finally being revealed. Jake made the decision to set course for the Veil Nebula. Coordinates, despite the risks. The New Hope joined a growing convoy of human ships all heading toward the same mysterious destination. None of them knew what they would find there, but Amy's visions suggested it would change everything they thought. They knew about themselves and their place in the galaxy. The human fleet arrived at the coordinates to find something that should not exist, hidden in the swirling gases of the Veil Nebula. A massive space station hung in the void like a metal city built by giants. The structure was clearly human in design, but used technology that was centuries ahead of anything the refugee ships possessed. Admiral Kate Sullivan took command of the joint expedition from her flagship, the Defiant. She had been the highest-ranking military officer among the exiles and had spent 50 years keeping the scattered human settlements safe from alien pirates and hostile environments. Looking at the ancient station through the view screen, she felt both wonder and deep concern. The station was enormous, stretching for kilometers in every direction, with docking bays large enough to hold their entire fleet. Strange energy fields surrounded the structure, and scanners showed it was definitely operational despite appearing to have been abandoned for thousands of years. Jake Morrison brought the New Hope alongside one of the smaller docking ports, while other ships found their own berths. The airlocks connected with mechanical precision that suggested the station was somehow expecting them. When the first teams boarded, they found corridors filled with breathable atmosphere and artificial gravity that worked perfectly. Dr. Ben Rodriguez led the team exploring the central archives, while Jake and his crew investigated the outer sections. Ben was a historian who had spent years studying what little remained of pre-exile human records. He hoped the station might contain information about why humanity had been scattered across the galaxy. The archive chamber was vast, with walls covered in displays that activated as soon as humans entered the room. Holographic interfaces appeared in the air, showing symbols and text in languages that seemed familiar yet impossible to read. The computer systems were clearly designed for human use, but operated with technology far beyond current understanding. A voice spoke from hidden speakers, using perfect standard English with an accent that sounded both ancient and familiar. The speaker identified itself as Mentor and claimed to be an artificial intelligence left behind to wait for humanity's return. The AI explained that it had been waiting for thousands of years for humans to reach the proper level of development. Mentor revealed information that shook the foundation of everything humans believed about themselves. According to the AI's records, humans were not originally from Earth and had never been a primitive species slowly developing technology. Instead, they were descendants of an ancient spacefaring civilization that had once controlled a significant portion of the galaxy. The original human empire had possessed technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level and travel between star systems instantly. They had built vast cities in space and on worlds across dozens of sectors. Most importantly, they had been engaged in a terrible war against something called the Devourers that threatened all life in the galaxy. Ben listened in amazement as Mentor explained that the Devourers were beings from outside normal space that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty void behind them. The creatures did not just destroy matter and energy, but somehow erased the fundamental information that allowed reality to exist in those areas. The ancient humans had discovered that the only way to stop the Devourers was to create a network of quantum gates that could imprison them in a pocket dimension. However, building and operating such a network required enormous sacrifices, including the complete abandonment of human technology and the scattering of their people to primitive worlds. Earth was one of many seed worlds where humans had been hidden, with their memories suppressed and their advanced capabilities locked away in their genetic code. The locks would only open when the species faced genuine extinction and had naturally evolved to the point where they could handle their true heritage. Meanwhile, engineer Tony Mitchell was examining the station's power systems and making discoveries that amazed him. The reactors used principles that human science said were impossible but clearly worked because they had been running for millennia without maintenance. The energy output was enough to power entire star systems yet produced no waste or radiation. Amy Johnson, who had experienced the visions from touching the artifacts, found that she could understand the station's interfaces better than anyone else. When she placed her hands on certain control panels, information flowed directly into her mind, showing her how the ancient technologies worked. Lisa Carter analyzed samples of the station's construction materials and found they were composed of elements that did not appear on any periodic table. The substances seemed to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, which explained how the structure could be both incredibly strong and surprisingly lightweight. The most shocking revelation came when Mentor showed them records of the exile from Earth 50 years earlier. The AI explained that the Hegemony Alliance had not acted out of prejudice or fear of human expansion. Instead, they had discovered traces of the ancient war and correctly identified humans as being connected to the galaxy's greatest threat. The 6 alien species that formed the hegemony had found archaeological evidence of the Devourer War on several worlds. Their scientists had determined that humans carried genetic markers linking them to the ancient empire that had originally freed the Devourers from their dimensional prison by accident. From the alien perspective, driving humans away from civilized space was not an act of aggression but a desperate attempt to prevent the return of the Devourers. The hegemony leaders believed that if humans ever regained their lost abilities, the quantum locks holding the Devourers would weaken and the creatures would escape. Mentor confirmed that this fear was not entirely unfounded. Using the ancient technology would indeed alert the Devourers to humanity's location and potentially weaken their prison. However, the AI also revealed that the Devourers were already beginning to break free on their own as the quantum gates slowly degraded over time. The choice facing humanity was simple but terrible. They could remain powerless refugees hiding on the galaxy's edge while the Devourers eventually escaped and consumed everything. Or they could reclaim their heritage and gain the power to fight, but risk accelerating the very catastrophe their ancestors had died to prevent, as the human leaders gathered in the station's main conference chamber to debate their options. Mentor provided one final piece of information. The ancient humans had been working on an ultimate solution when their civilization fell. Deep in the station's core lay something called the Infinity Engine that could theoretically rewrite the laws of physics across an entire galaxy. However, using such a device would require the combined mental energy of thousands of awakened humans, and success was far from guaranteed. The original Empire had never completed their research, and the risks of activation were unknown. Mentor could only say that the engine represented humanity's last hope if conventional weapons failed against the Devourers. Jake Morrison looked around the chamber at the faces of captains and commanders who had spent 50 years just trying to survive. Now they were being asked to make a decision that could save or damn the entire galaxy. The weight of their ancestors' legacy pressed down on them like the gravity of a dying star. The vote was close, but the human leaders decided to activate the awakening protocol, despite Mentor's warnings about the risks. Admiral Kate Sullivan cast the deciding vote after spending 3 sleepless days weighing the options. She knew that doing nothing meant slow extinction, while taking action might bring quick destruction, but at least offered a chance of survival. Dr. Helen Baker led the research team attempting to unlock the genetic barriers in human DNA using the ancient technology. The process was incredibly dangerous because it involved directly interfacing human nervous systems with quantum field generators that had not been used for thousands of years. The first volunteers suffered severe neural damage and several died. During the initial experiments, Helen worked around the clock studying the bodies and brains of those who had not survived the process. She discovered that humans who had been exposed to the artifact fragments, like Amy Johnson, had a much higher chance of surviving the awakening procedure. Something about the earlier contact prepared their minds for the quantum field interface. The survivors of the awakening process emerged fundamentally changed. Their cognitive abilities increased dramatically, and they gained an intuitive understanding of the ancient technologies that even Mentor found impressive. More importantly, they began to remember things that had never happened to them personally, but were somehow stored in their genetic memory. Captain Steve Hughes volunteered to command the first ship retrofitted with recovered ancient technology. The vessel had been a simple cargo hauler called the Mary Jane, but was renamed Reclaimer after the installation of quantum drive systems and energy field generators. Steve found that piloting the upgraded ship required a completely different mindset than operating conventional vessels. The Reclaimer could travel faster than light without using traditional engines by somehow folding space around itself. The ship's energy shields did not just deflect incoming attacks, but seemed to bend reality to make damage impossible. Most amazingly, the weapons could restructure matter at the molecular level, turning asteroids into useful materials or hostile missiles into harmless gas. Testing the new systems revealed capabilities that amazed even the awakened humans. The ship could phase partially out of normal space to avoid obstacles or attacks. The crew could communicate instantly across vast distances using quantum entanglement fields. Scanner arrays could detect events happening light years away in real time. However, the activation of human technology did not go unnoticed by the rest of the galaxy. Admiral Zixtar of the Ethereal Dominion detected the unique energy signatures emanating from the Veil Nebula using deep space monitoring stations scattered across hegemony territory. The readings matched ancient records that filled the alien commander with absolute terror. Zixtar immediately contacted the other hegemony leaders and convinced them to launch a massive preemptive strike against what they believed was an awakening doomsday weapon. The alien fleet that assembled was the largest military force ever gathered by the Six Species Alliance. Hundreds of ships armed with planet-killing weapons headed toward the Nebula commander. Greg Thompson coordinated the human defense from the ancient station, while Admiral Kate Sullivan led the Reclaimer and several other upgraded ships in space. Combat. The human forces were vastly outnumbered, but their recovered technology provided advantages that the hegemony had not expected. The battle was unlike anything that had ever occurred in the galaxy. Human ships phased in and out of normal space, striking at enemy vessels from impossible angles. Alien plasma weapons passed harmlessly through quantum shields, while human energy beams cut through enemy hulls like they were made of paper. During the most intense part of the fighting, pilot Nancy Allen found herself in a desperate situation when her fighter's shields failed and multiple enemy ships converged on her position. In a last attempt to protect the research station, she flew directly into one of the ancient defense nodes that surrounded the structure. Nancy should have been vaporized instantly by the massive energy discharge, but instead something incredible happened. Her consciousness merged with the quantum field surrounding the station, and she became something new that existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum realm. The transformation gave Nancy abilities that defied understanding. She could communicate instantly with any human across vast distances and could perceive events happening simultaneously in multiple locations. Most importantly, she could interface directly with the ancient defense systems and coordinate them with an efficiency that surprised even Mentor Nancy's new form of existence, revealed the true purpose of the genetic locks that had hidden human abilities for so long. The barriers had not just been concealing technological knowledge, but had been preparing humanity to transcend their purely physical nature. The ancient humans had been evolving beyond normal matter when the Devourer War interrupted their development. The awakening process was not just about recovering lost technology, but about completing an evolutionary transformation that had been interrupted thousands of years earlier. Humans were meant to become beings of pure consciousness that could exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously while retaining their individual personalities and memories. As more humans underwent the awakening process successfully, the survivors began forming a network of linked consciousness that allowed them to share knowledge and coordinate actions perfectly. The network grew stronger with each new addition and made subsequent awakenings safer and more likely to succeed. However, Nancy's transformation also triggered automatic warning systems throughout the ancient station. Mentor informed the human leaders that the dimensional barriers holding the Devourers had detected the quantum fluctuations from Nancy's evolution and were beginning to weaken in response. Deep space monitoring stations across the galaxy began detecting reality distortions in areas where the quantum gates were located. The Devourers were using the awakening energy signature to locate and attack their prison walls from the inside. Several of the oldest gates suffered partial failures, allowing small scout forces to break through into normal space. The first Devourer scouts appeared in the Andromeda sector, where they immediately began consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems simply ceased to exist as the creatures passed through, leaving behind regions where the fundamental laws of physics no longer operated correctly. Lieutenant Mary Turner commanded the reconnaissance ship Farsight and was among the first humans to witness the horror of Devourer attacks firsthand. Her crew watched in amazement and terror as planets and stars were not just destroyed, but completely erased from existence, along with all the space they had occupied. Mary's reports reached the human fleet in the Veil Nebula and confirmed Mentor's worst predictions about what would happen if the Devourers escaped their prison. The creatures were not just destroying matter and energy, but were somehow unmaking the basic quantum information that allowed reality to exist in the affected areas. The awakening process accelerated as human leaders realized they had perhaps months before the main Devourer force broke through the weakening barriers. Every human settlement received emergency broadcasts explaining the situation and requesting volunteers for the dangerous consciousness expansion procedure Dr. Helen Baker developed. New techniques based on Nancy Allen's transformation that made the awakening process significantly safer and more reliable. The procedure became easier as more humans successfully underwent it, as if the awakened individuals were creating a field effect that helped others transcend their limitations. Engineer Carl Johnson made the discovery that would change everything when he found hidden archives in the station's core containing research notes from the original human empire. The ancient scientists had been working on something called the Infinity Engine when their civilization fell to the Devourer War. The engine was designed to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics across an entire galaxy, but required the combined mental energy of every awakened human to operate. Success was not guaranteed, and failure would likely result in the complete destruction of all life in the affected region, as reports came in of more quantum gates failing and additional Devourer scouts breaking through the barriers. The human leaders faced their final choice. They could attempt to use conventional weapons and tactics against an enemy that consumed reality itself, or they could risk everything on an untested superweapon that might save or damn the galaxy. With the Devourers breaking through the dimensional barriers faster than anyone expected, humanity faced a desperate race against time. Dr. Paul Wright led teams of awakened humans to locate and activate the remaining quantum gates that formed the ancient prison network. Each gate required direct consciousness interface to operate, but the process burned out most minds that attempted the connection. Paul discovered that the gate network covered dozens of star systems and had been designed with multiple redundancies to prevent exactly what was happening now. However, thousands of years of neglect had weakened the quantum foundations, and several critical nodes had already failed completely, allowing larger devourer forces to enter normal space. Meanwhile, the Hegemony Alliance realized their terrible mistake when their deep space sensors detected the reality distortion spreading across multiple sectors. Ambassador Keldoth of the Crystal Collective was the first alien leader to understand that humans had not been trying to release an ancient weapon, but had been attempting to repair an ancient defense system. Keldoth reached out to Admiral Kate Sullivan through carefully encrypted channels offering a ceasefire and potential alliance against the greater threat. The negotiations were extremely difficult because 50 years of hatred and mistrust could not be overcome easily. Many humans wanted revenge for their exile, while many aliens still believed humans were responsible for the current crisis captain. Frank Lewis served as the primary human liaison during the tense diplomatic meetings that took place in neutral space. Frank had lost his family during the original Exodus and had every reason to hate the aliens, but he also understood that survival required cooperation against an enemy that would destroy everyone equally. The first joint human hegemony operation took place at the failing quantum gate in the Centauri system, where Devourer scouts had been detected moving toward inhabited worlds. The combined fleet arrived to find something that challenged everything they thought they knew about space and physics. The region around the damaged gate looked like a nightmare version of normal space, where stars flickered in and out of existence and planets orbited in impossible directions. The Devourers themselves were barely visible as dark shapes that seemed to absorb light and matter simply by existing near them. Lieutenant Mary Turner led the reconnaissance mission into the distorted zone, flying her ship Farsight alongside alien vessels using completely different technologies. The mixed crew learned to coordinate their wildly different systems while fighting an enemy that could unmake their weapons and shields by touching them. The battle revealed that hegemony technology, while less advanced than recovered human systems, operated on principles that the Devourers had not encountered in their original war. Alien quantum scramblers and reality anchors could temporarily stabilize areas where physics had broken down, giving human consciousness weapons time to target the creatures back at the ancient station. Engineer Carl Johnson worked frantically to integrate hegemony shield generators with human quantum systems, creating hybrid defenses that neither species could have developed alone. The cooperation between human intuitive understanding and alien systematic engineering produced innovations that surprised both sides. Dr. Sandra Kim took charge of the expanded awakening program that was now processing volunteers from multiple human settlements simultaneously. The procedure had become much safer thanks to Nancy Allen's quantum network effect, but still required careful preparation and monitoring to prevent neural damage. Sandra discovered that humans who underwent awakening in groups had higher success rates and developed stronger connections to the consciousness network. She theorized that humanity was naturally evolving toward a collective intelligence while maintaining individual personalities and memories. As more humans successfully awakened, the quantum network grew exponentially in power and capability. Nancy Allen, who existed as pure consciousness within the network, reported that she could perceive events across the entire galaxy simultaneously and coordinate defensive actions in real time. However, the network also detected increasingly urgent warnings from the failing quantum gates. The main Devourer force was using the scout breaches to map the prison structure and identify the weakest points for a massive coordinated escape attempt. Dr. Ben Rodriguez made a crucial discovery while studying the oldest records in the station archives. The original human empire had not been trying to simply destroy the Devourers, but had been attempting to find a way to cure them of whatever had corrupted their species in the first place. The ancient records revealed that the Devourers had once been a normal spacefaring civilization that had attempted their own consciousness transcendence thousands of years before humans began their evolution. However, something had gone wrong with their process, and they had become trapped in a feedback loop of hunger and consumption. The revelation changed everything about the human approach to the crisis. Instead of preparing to fight the devourers, with weapons that might not work against reality-consuming entities, the research teams began investigating ways to communicate with whatever remained of the original devourer consciousness. Amy Johnson, who had been among the first humans to experience ancient memories, volunteered to attempt direct mental contact with devourer scouts using the quantum network as a buffer. The process was incredibly dangerous because exposure to corrupted consciousness could permanently damage human minds. Amy's first contact attempt lasted only seconds before Nancy Allen had to sever the connection to prevent Amy's mind from being consumed. However, those few seconds provided critical information about the internal structure of devourer group consciousness and confirmed that traces of their original personalities still existed. The research revealed that the Infinity Engine had been designed not as a weapon, but as a massive consciousness healing device that could potentially restore the devourers to their original form. However, using the engine for this purpose would require linking human consciousness directly to the corrupted devourer network, with no guarantee of success. As reports came in of quantum gates failing across multiple sectors, the human and alien leaders faced their most difficult decision. Conventional weapons had proven useless against the devourers, and running away would only delay the inevitable consumption of the Galaxy Admiral. Kate Sullivan convened a joint council aboard the ancient station with representatives from all 6 hegemony species. The meeting was historic because it marked the first time humans and aliens had worked together as equals rather than as conquerors and subjects. The debate lasted for hours as different species contributed their unique perspectives on consciousness, transcendence, and quantum mechanics. The Ethereal Dominion provided crucial data about dimensional barrier technology, while the Machine Collective offered computational models for large-scale consciousness integration. Captain Steve Hughes reported from the front lines where the Reclaimer and other hybrid ships were fighting desperate holding actions against increasingly large devourer forces. The creatures seemed to be learning from each encounter and adapting their tactics to counter both human and alien defensive measures. Engineer Tony Mitchell warned that the quantum gate network was approaching complete collapse and estimated they had perhaps weeks before the main devourer force broke through in overwhelming numbers. The dimensional barriers that had held for thousands of years were finally failing under the combined pressure of age and repeated attacks. Dr. Helen Baker presented her analysis of the consciousness integration requirements for operating the Infinity Engine. Every awakened human would need to link their mind to the network while simultaneously maintaining individual identity and purpose. Failure could result in the complete loss of human consciousness, or worse, corruption by devourer influence. The vote was unanimous, despite the terrible risks involved. Humanity and their new alien allies would attempt to use the Infinity Engine not to destroy the devourers, but to heal them and restore their original nature. The decision required absolute trust between former enemies and complete faith in technologies that had never been fully tested. As the combined fleets prepared for what might be the final battle, Nancy Allen's consciousness touched every awakened human across the galaxy. Through the quantum network, she shared the weight of responsibility and the hope that they might not just save their own species, but redeem an ancient enemy that had been suffering for thousands of years. The combined human hegemony fleet made its final stand at the Nexus Point, where the central hub of the quantum gate network had maintained the devourer prison for thousands of years. Admiral Kate Sullivan commanded the joint forces from her flagship, while Dr. Helen Baker coordinated the Infinity Engine project from the ancient station that would serve as the focal point for the galaxy-spanning consciousness. Link, the Nexus Point, was unlike anywhere else in known space because it existed partially in normal reality and partially in the quantum dimensions where the gate network operated. Stars appeared and disappeared as gravitational fields shifted between dimensions, and time itself seemed to flow differently in various regions. General Mike Foster led ground forces defending the gate installation on Nexus Prime, the planet that housed the primary control systems for the entire network. The surface of the world was covered with massive crystalline structures that channeled quantum energies from across the galaxy into the central processing cores Foster's troops found, themselves preparing for a battle unlike anything in military history because the Devourers did not attack in conventional ways. The creatures simply moved through space, and everything they touched ceased to exist in any meaningful sense, leaving behind regions where cause and effect broke down completely in space. Captain Steve Hughes piloted the Reclaimer alongside vessels from all 6 hegemony species in formations that would have been impossible just months earlier. The awakened human crews could perceive and fight in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while alien technology provided stability fields that prevented reality from completely collapsing. Nancy Allen existed as pure consciousness within the quantum network and coordinated the defense by instantly sharing tactical information across the entire fleet. Through her connection to the awakened humans, she could see the battle from hundreds of perspectives at once and guide individual ships through the dimensional maze surrounding the nexus point. The hegemony forces proved crucial to the defense because their technologies operated on completely different principles than either human systems or Devourer abilities. Crystal Collective ships could generate quantum barriers that slowed the reality-consuming effects, while Machine Collective vessels provided computational power for the consciousness network engineer Tony Mitchell worked frantically in the stations. Core chambers to integrate all the different technologies into a unified system capable of channeling the mental energy of every awakened human into the Infinity Engine. The device itself was a massive crystalline structure that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously as the battle raged across multiple levels of reality. Dr. Ben Rodriguez made the most important discovery in the station's deepest archives. Hidden in files that even Mentor had not accessed, he found the original research notes from the scientists who had first encountered the corrupted Devourer civilization. The records revealed that the Devourers had once been called the Gardeners and had been the galaxy's first species to achieve consciousness transcendence. They had successfully evolved beyond physical form and had spent millions of years nurturing other species and helping them develop. However, the Gardeners had made a critical error during their transcendence process by attempting to preserve their individual consciousness while simultaneously merging into a collective entity. The feedback loop created by this contradiction had gradually corrupted their nature, turning them from nurturers into consumers. The ancient human empire had discovered this truth during their war with the Devourers and had been working on a solution when their civilization fell. The Infinity Engine was designed to repair the fundamental flaw in the Gardner transcendence process by providing a framework for collective consciousness that preserved individual identity as the quantum barriers finally began their complete collapse. The main Devourer force poured into normal space like a tide of darkness that erased everything in its path. The creatures had learned from their scouts and now attacked in coordinated waves that overwhelmed even the combined human hegemony. Defense's reality began unraveling on a massive scale as thousands of Devourers entered the Nexus Point region. Entire sections of space simply stopped existing, and the laws of physics broke down in expanding spheres around each creature. The defending fleet found itself fighting in an environment where their weapons might work normally or might turn into flowers depending on local reality conditions. Dr. Sandra Kim linked her consciousness to the network and felt the terrible mental pressure as every awakened human across the galaxy joined their minds together in preparation for the Infinity Engine activation. The collective included over 50,000 individuals ranging from experienced military personnel to civilian volunteers who had awakened just days earlier. Captain Jake Morrison, whose discovery of the first artifacts had started the entire chain of events, served as one of the primary interface nodes between human consciousness and the engine control systems. Through him, the collective human mind would attempt to reach out to the corrupted Devourer intelligence and offer healing instead of destruction. Amy Johnson took the most dangerous role as the primary contact specialist who would actually touch minds with the Devourer Collective, while protected by the full power of the Human Consciousness Network. Her earlier experience with artifact visions and partial Devourer contact made her the most qualified candidate, despite the enormous risks. The engine-powered-up reality around the station began shifting in ways that defied description. The boundaries between normal space and quantum dimensions dissolved, and the consciousness of every participant expanded to encompass multiple levels of existence simultaneously. Through the network, Nancy Allen felt the approach of the Devourer, overmined as it directed the assault on the Nexus Point. The alien intelligence was vast and ancient, but also clearly damaged by thousands of years of consuming rather than creating. Underneath the corruption, she sensed traces of what the Gardeners had once been. The moment of contact arrived as Amy Johnson's consciousness touched the edge of the Devourer Collective, while shielded by the combined mental energy of the entire human species. The sensation was like diving into an ocean of liquid darkness that burned with hunger and despair, but also contained fragments of beauty and hope. Through Amy, the human network began transmitting not weapons or threats, but memories of growth and cooperation and the joy of discovery. They showed the Devourers what they had once been and offered them a path back to their original nature through the healing power of the Infinity Engine. The response was immediate and terrifying as the corrupted portions of the Devourer consciousness lashed out at the human minds, trying to drag them into the same feedback loop that had destroyed the Gardeners. Several consciousness links shattered instantly, and those humans fell into comas that might be permanent. However, other links held firm, supported by the growing strength of the network and the steady guidance of Nancy Allen's quantum existence. Through these surviving connections, the healing process began as human consciousness merged temporarily with Devourer entities and showed them how to exist without consuming. The battle became something unprecedented in galactic history as weapons were replaced by empathy and destruction gave way to restoration. Instead of fighting the reality-warping effects of the Devourers awakened, humans began teaching them how to control their abilities and use them constructively. Captain Frank Lewis coordinated with the Hegemony Fleet to contain the areas where reality had completely broken down while the consciousness healing process continued. The various alien species contributed their understanding of different aspects of physics and psychology to support the unprecedented rescue operation. As more Devourers remembered their original nature, they began actively helping to repair the damage they had caused. Star systems that had been erased were restored from quantum echoes, and regions where physics had broken down gradually returned to normal as the creatures learned to create rather than consume. With reality collapsing around the Nexus Point, humanity made its final desperate gambit as every awakened human from Admiral Kate Sullivan to civilian volunteers who had transcended just hours earlier joined their consciousness to Nancy Allen's quantum network. Dr. Helen Baker initiated the Infinity Engine, but instead of using it as a weapon, they attempted to heal the corruption that had consumed the Devourer civilization for thousands of years. The process was agony beyond description, as human minds were forced to comprehend alien thoughts that had been twisted by millennia of consuming instead of creating. The feedback from the corrupted Devourer consciousness shattered dozens of mental links and left those humans in permanent comas, but others held firm, supported by the growing strength of the collective network. Captain Jake Morrison became the primary bridge between the two species as his consciousness dove deep into the Devourer collective, seeking the original Gardener personalities that still existed beneath layers of corruption and hunger. Through him, humanity reached out with memories of cooperation and growth instead of fear and destruction. In the depths of the alien hive mind, Dr. Sandra Kim encountered something beautiful and terrible as she found the remnants of the original Gardener civilization. These ancient beings had once nurtured life across the galaxy and had achieved consciousness transcendence millions of years before humans began their own evolution. Sandra realized that the Gardeners had faced the same choice: that humanity was making now and had failed when they tried to preserve individual identity while merging into a collective consciousness. The contradiction had created the feedback loop that gradually corrupted their nature and turned them into the reality-consuming devourers. The healing process became a teaching experience as awakened humans like engineer Carl Johnson showed the trapped gardener consciousness how to exist as both individuals and part of a greater whole. The human network had solved the transcendence problem that had destroyed the older civilization by maintaining personal identity within collective awareness. Meanwhile, Captain Frank Lewis coordinated with the hegemony fleet to contain the regions, where reality had completely collapsed during the worst of the Devourer attacks. The various alien species contributed their unique technologies to create stability fields around the damaged areas. While the consciousness healing continued, engineer Tony Mitchell monitored the Infinity Engine as it channeled the combined mental energy of tens of thousands of minds into a galaxy-spanning field that gradually restored the corrupted Devourer entities to their original nature. The process required perfect balance because too much pressure would destroy both species, while too little would fail to break the corruption cycle. The breakthrough came when pilot Nancy Allen made the ultimate sacrifice by merging her quantum existence completely with the Devourer over mind. Her consciousness became the bridge between human and gardener awareness, showing the ancient beings how they could return to their original nature without losing what they had become. Nancy's transformation created a cascade effect that spread through the entire Devourer collective as corrupted entities remembered their true purpose and began actively working to repair the damage they had caused. Reality itself started healing as the creatures learned to create and nurture instead of consuming and destroying. Star systems that had been completely erased during the attacks were restored from quantum echoes as the reformed gardeners used their reality manipulation abilities constructively. Planets that had ceased to exist reappeared with their original populations intact, as if the destruction had never occurred. The galaxy itself began to change as the healing process expanded, beyond just repairing damage to actually improving the fundamental structure of space and time. The reformed gardeners worked with human consciousness to create new forms of faster-than-light travel and communication that would benefit all species. As the crisis ended, humanity emerged not as conquerors or destroyers, but as healers and teachers, who had solved a problem that had threatened the galaxy for thousands of years. The other species of the Hegemony Alliance finally understood that humans were not the source of the ancient threat, but were the key to resolving it. The formal end of the war came when Admiral Kate Sullivan met with Ambassador Keldoth and the other hegemony leaders aboard the ancient station to sign agreements that dissolved the old alliance structure. In its place, they created a true cooperative federation where all species worked together as equals. Dr. Ben Rodriguez documented the entire experience for future generations and established new archives that would preserve the knowledge gained from contact with the Gardener civilization. The records would help other species understand consciousness transcendence and avoid the mistakes that had corrupted the original Gardeners. Captain Steve Hughes commanded the first joint exploration mission to regions of space that had been transformed by the healing process. The Reclaimer and ships from all the allied species worked together to map the new realities that had been created when the Gardeners restored their damaged regions. The most significant change was in humanity itself, as the awakening process had permanently altered human consciousness. Those who had undergone transcendence retained their enhanced abilities and continued to exist as part of Nancy Allen's quantum network while maintaining their individual personalities and relationships. Dr. Helen Baker established training programs to help newly awakened humans learn to control their expanded consciousness and use their abilities responsibly. The programs emphasized cooperation and nurturing rather than domination or control, reflecting the lessons learned from the Gardener corruption engineer Amy Johnson, who had experienced the first artifact visions, became one of the primary teachers, helping other species begin their own consciousness evolution. The process was slower and safer for aliens because humans could now guide them through the transcendence without the risks that had destroyed the original gardeners. The transformation was not limited to the species that had participated in the final battle as news of the consciousness breakthrough spread across the galaxy. Civilizations that had been isolated for thousands of years began reaching out to join the growing network of awakened species. General Mike Foster established new defense protocols that emphasized protection and cooperation rather than conquest or destruction. The military forces of all species were restructured to focus on exploration and rescue operations rather than warfare against each other. As years passed, the galaxy became a fundamentally different place where consciousness transcendence was available to any species willing to learn from humanity's experience and accept guidance from the reformed gardeners. The age of separate civilizations competing for resources ended as collective awareness made cooperation natural and beneficial. Captain Jake Morrison, who had started the entire adventure by discovering artifact fragments in an asteroid field found, himself serving as humanity's first consciousness ambassador. His role involved helping newly contacted species understand the transcendence process and choose their own path toward greater awareness. The final scene took place on New Earth Station, a massive structure built using both human quantum technology and reformed Gardner reality manipulation abilities. Jake stood on the observation deck watching human children play alongside young aliens from dozens of species, while Nancy Allen's presence watched over them all from the quantum realm. Humanity had indeed taken back everything they had lost during the exile, but had gained something far more valuable in the process. Instead of recovering their ancient empire through conquest, they had created something entirely new through compassion and sacrifice. The scattered refugees who had spent 50 years hiding on the galaxy's edge had become the teachers and healers who guided an entirely new form of civilization. The transformation was not complete as other species across the galaxy continued to begin their own awakening processes, guided by human mentors who understood both the promise and the dangers of consciousness transcendence, looking out at the stars. Jake knew that this was only the beginning of humanity's true journey. The age of individual species thinking only of themselves had ended, and the age of galactic consciousness had begun, with humans serving as the bridges between different forms of awareness and existence.